Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking into some really intense material that you shared with us. It's from a text called Betrayal's Echo, a haunted wife's story, and specifically, there's this section, I wasn't enough for her, so I left her haunted.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And it's not just one story, is it? It's like different voices telling their side of the same tragic events.
Exactly. Interconnected first-person accounts. We're going to explore marriage, betrayal, consequences, and this really pervasive sense of being haunted that runs through it.
So our goal here is basically to unpack the story as the text tells it, right?
Yeah.
Look at the events, the emotions, how those different viewpoints clash or connect.
Right. And to pull you right in, let's start with this quote from the source. When she walked through that front door, she thought she was coming home from a weekend of freedom. What she didn't know was that her husband had already left forever.
Wow. That sets a chilling tone immediately.
It really does. So let's start where the text starts, with the husband's account. He lays out his life, 24 years married to Natalie. He talks about supporting her law career, his own IT job.
And there's that detail early on about children, isn't there? How they decided against it, but it clearly hurt him. He mentions he never pushed it, but you feel that lingering pain.
Yeah, definitely. It's like an undercurrent.
And the text seems to set up this dynamic, his sacrifices, her success, and this like unfulfilled dream simmering underneath for him. It feels important for what comes later.
Absolutely. And then comes the moment that just ignites everything. According to his account, they've just been intimate. And she rolls over, looks at her phone, and just drops this bombshell.
Yeah, the quote he includes is just staggering. I'm in a phase. I need variety. You'll always be my safe space, but one man isn't enough anymore.
Can you imagine? The text says his reaction was just stunned silence.
Understandably. He felt humiliated, like an afterthought. And the narrative really emphasizes that sleepless night, him just lying there, imagining her with this colleague, Connor.
Awful. And the next day, his account says he doesn't argue, doesn't confront her, nothing. He just watches her leave with Connor.
Doesn't even say goodbye.
No. Goes to work, feels like a zombie, and he makes a point of saying he didn't stop her.
That passivity is telling, isn't it? And the text links it to his isolation, mentioning his parents are gone, other friendships faded, like she was his entire world.
Yeah, he felt he had no one else, which feeds into this dark weekend described in his account. He's alone, skewing, and starts making these decisions.
Really significant decisions. Two stand out, right?
Right. First, the bank account. He empties her joint account.
And the donation part is key. He gives almost all of it to charities for kids in foster care. Leaves exactly 24 hours, $1 for each year.
The text explicitly says he connected that to the children they never had, like a final bitter statement.
A very pointed message. And the second action.
He emails her law firm, tells them about her weekend with Connor, just lays it all out. He wanted them to know.
Wow. So it's not just personal betrayal he's reacting to. He's aiming for professional consequences, too. It's calculated.
It really seems that way in his telling.
Yeah.
The end of his section is just bleak. He gets his pistol, describes waiting for the courage, places a note next to his wedding ring on the coffee table.
It's this methodical buildup in his narrative towards this one irreversible act. It positions everything, the money, the email, the note, the final act, as his response, his consequence.
His last thoughts, the text says, are about the young woman he married. And then he pulls the trigger.
And that's where his part of the story ends.
Yeah. Then the perspective shifts entirely. We get the wife's account. And interestingly, in her section, she's called Helen, not Natalie.
Okay, Helen's version. How does she describe that weekend?
Well, very differently. She calls it fun, a way to unwind.
Yeah.
She justifies it, saying she needed something exciting before she felt too old.
So a completely different framing.
Totally. She talks about dinner drinks, dancing with Connor, going back to his place. And she specifically notes she wasn't thinking about Kyle. That's her husband's name in her account. Not once.
That contrast is stark, isn't it? Her narrative, at least initially, shows this complete disconnect from his reality, from the agony his account describes. It's like they were living in separate universes that weekend.
It feels like it. Though there is this one slightly uncomfortable moment she recounts. Connor apparently joked about having sex in front of him, meaning Kyle.
Oof. How did she react to that?
She says she laughed it off, but admits she'd fantasized about something similar once, years ago, but now the thought made her feel sick.
So maybe a tiny crack in the fun weekend narrative even then. A hint of something unsettling beneath the surface for her.
Maybe. A little bit of foreshadowing, perhaps. Her story then moves to her coming home Sunday afternoon. and right away she feels something's wrong.
How does the text describe that?
Little details. The lawn isn't mowed, the blinds are all closed, the house looks frozen in time. She just gets this feeling that something is off.
The text uses atmosphere really well there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not just visuals, but she mentions the smell inside, the silence. It says the house felt wrong, not just empty. It builds this sense of dread before she knows anything.
Exactly. And then she finds him, finds Kyle. Her reaction is visceral. She runs outside, vomits. And the police, the coroners arrive.
Just horrific.
She describes sitting outside, shaking, just seeing the image over and over, the couch, the blood, his ring, the note, burned into her memory.
And the police questioning, how does her account handle that?
She mentions telling them she was away with a colleague. And she notes the way the officer's pen just paused. Like, in that moment, the truth was out. The collision of her secret life and this public tragedy.
Brutal realization. And the note. What did she say it said?
She recounts the words. It's chilling. He told me I'd destroyed him, that he couldn't live as my afterthought, that he'd given me everything, and I gave him nothing in return. He said I'd killed our marriage. And him.
Heavy. And the end.
The final line she quotes is just, rot in hell.
Wow. How does she describe her reaction to reading that?
She says she was stunned, numb, didn't cry immediately, but she felt something inside me cracked. And she emphasizes, Kyle had never spoken to me like that, ever.
So it wasn't just the content, but the sheer violence of the language from him that shattered something. It destroyed her image of him, of their whole past together, maybe.
Seems like it. And the fallout begins almost immediately, that same night.
Right, the practical consequences he set in motion. The text mentions her credit card.
Yep, joint card gets declined. That's how she finds out he'd emptied the shared account and made those donations.
With that clear message attached, you took children off the table. I'll make sure children benefit anyway.
It's like he's still speaking to her,
Wow.
even after. Exactly. And it's not just financial. The professional blow lands fast.
Because he emailed the firm.
Right. She gets called in by her boss, describes the atmosphere everyone knows. Kyle had emailed everyone. The meeting with the boss, Mr. Bledsoe, is tough. He says, I'm disappointed in you, Helen. Not just for what happened, but for the judgment you showed.
Ouch. So immediate professional impact.
She's suspended. Her career is suddenly just up in the air.
It really shows how the text ties the personal tragedy directly to public professional ruin. He made sure of that. It wasn't contained.
No. And then there's this conversation she recounts having with her sister. It feels like a real low point.
What happened?
Her sister asks her, point blank, was it worth it? The weekend.
Devastating, Carlin.
Yeah. Helen describes struggling to answer. She admits it had been exciting at the time, but then just whispers, no. Says her whole life felt like it was in free fall.
And that's when she finally breaks down.
It's the first time she cries, according to her account. Like the numbness finally shattered and the full weight of it hit her.
A definite turning point in her emotional state as presented in the text.
And it's around this time, or maybe starting slightly before, that the haunting element really comes into play in her narrative. It starts with dreams.
What kind of dreams?
The first one she describes, she's back in the house, it's dark. She hears Kyle's voice saying, you left me.
Mm-hmm.
Then she sees him looking pale, disappointed. He says, you could have said goodbye, and then he just vanishes.
So initially it reads like classic manifestations of guilt, right? Her subconscious grappling with his last moments, his note, maybe?
That's how it starts. But she says it gets worse, especially after she moves in with her sister to get out of the house. The dreams continue. Sometimes he's just standing there silently. But then things start happening when she's awake.
Okay, this is where it shifts. What kinds of things?
Seeing him in the mirror for a split second, hearing noises, movement in the house when she's alone.
And the text gives some really specific, chilling examples, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Like finding his ring, the wedding ring, this police gave back to her in her drawer at her sister's place. It wasn't there before.
Yeah.
And it's wrapped with a typed message, same style as the note. You could have said goodbye.
That's incredibly creepy, blurring the lines between psychological stress and something else entirely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And other things, too. The bathroom sink turning on by itself. Finding words written in the steam on the mirror. I see you.
Wow.
And then the detail that really seems to confirm, within the story at least, that it's not just in her head.
Mm.
Her sister's little girl, Sophie, who's 6.
What does Sophie see?
Sophie describes seeing the sad man with the hole in his shirt.
Directly referencing his death. That's, yeah. Using the child's perspective like that really ups the ante in the narrative, making the haunting feel tangible, external within the story's reality.
Right. Helen tries therapy, but she admits in her account that she holds back the full story about the haunting. She says she just knew it wasn't in her head
She's convinced it's real, not just trauma.
completely. And it builds to this climax. She describes seeing him, standing right there in the hallway at her sister's house. Not a dream.
Seeing him as he was.
Yes, looking the same as when she found him. And he speaks to her.
What does he say?
You don't get to move on.
Chilling. Her reaction.
Pure terror, screaming, collapsing. She ends up in the ER. They call it a breakdown, severe stress reaction. But she insists in her telling it wasn't guilt. This was him.
The narrative really pushes this confrontation as the inevitable point, making her and us reading it face the question of what this haunting is within the story's logic. Her certainty is absolute there.
After that, she gets desperate, tries everything to stop it, sage, candles, searching online forums for help. She even goes outside by the fire pit and starts whispering apologies.
What does she say?
She recounts saying, Kyle, I'm sorry. Apologizing for how she loved him, for hurting him, for leaving him alone that weekend, just pouring it out.
A real act of desperation, trying anything to find peace, to make it stop. Does it work?
Well, she gets a response. But maybe not the one she wanted. A typed letter appears, taped to her bedroom window. Same font, same tone as the suicide note.
Oh no. What does this one say?
It says, I heard you, I forgive you, but I'm not leaving.
I forgive you, but I'm not leaving. That's wow.
And then the final line, now you'll never be alone.
That doesn't sound like forgiveness. That sounds like a sentence. Like, I acknowledge your apology, but the consequence remains. It locks her into this state, doesn't it?
That's exactly how she describes feeling, like a life sentence, not absolution. And the text wraps up 8 months later.
Still haunted.
Still haunted, living with her sister, feeling trapped in this prison. She lost her job. Connor abandoned her pretty quickly. The story itself never became public, just another quiet tragedy. But for her, it's not quiet. She still feels him, sees him. It's constant.
So the haunting is presented as this enduring, inescapable reality for her.
Yes. And the text closes with these lines. Some betrayals don't end with screaming matches. Some don't end at all. They just echo forever.
A very powerful ending to the narrative itself.
So after going through all that, this really intense story laid out in the text, what does it leave you, the listener, with?
Well, I think this text, the way it presents these events from both sides, really hammers home how betrayal can just unleash these devastating, irreversible consequences for everyone involved.
Yeah, death for him, but for her,
Wow.
it's this cascade of ruin.
Exactly. Professional ruin, isolation, and this profound psychological torment, which the text presents as potentially a literal haunting. It shows different kinds of destruction stemming from one core act of betrayal and the reaction to it.
And it makes you think about how seemingly, I don't know, smaller decisions or casual dismissals, like her "I'm in a phase" comment, can detonate in ways you'd never imagine.
Absolutely. The text paints this picture of an incredibly long shadow cast by that one weekend, that one final act. It traps Helen in this echo, this consequence. It raises huge questions about responsibility, guilt, and maybe even the nature of revenge or justice, as Kyle perceived it.
Okay, so thinking just about the narrative presented in the source material. Kyle's final actions, the suicide itself, emptying the account, the emails, the note, they all feel incredibly deliberate, right? Aimed at causing specific consequences.
Definitely portrayed that way in the text. Calculated acts.
So the haunting then, as Helen experiences it in her account, it feels like the ultimate, maybe the intended, enduring consequence he managed to inflict.
It certainly reads that way.
So here's something to think about, based only on how this story is told in the text. Does this narrative suggest that some actions, some intense emotions tied to death, can genuinely succeed in haunting or controlling the future of the person left behind? Could Kyle's final, deliberate acts have effectively transformed Helen's psychological state, her guilt, into something the story presents as a relentless, almost external reality? What does that final message, "Now you'll never be alone," truly signify within the confines of this narrative? Is it a curse, a promise, a statement of fact from his perspective?
Heavy questions left by a really heavy story.
Indeed. Thank you for sharing this source material with us for this deep dive. Exploring intense narratives like this one, as presented in the text, really lets us grapple with complex human experiences and the far-reaching ripples of our actions, seen through conflicting eyes.